Okay, hello YouTube. Today we're going to be showing a very simple trap that you can try to play against the Caro-Kann. Just a really quick way to try to sneak in checkmate with the white pieces. And I'm going to go a little bit deeper on this, and I'm going to actually show you what to do if your opponent plays the correct move and blocks that really simple trap. So you know how to get a good position even if they know the trap. So if you like content like this and you want to see more of it, please hit that subscribe button and click on that notification icon. So we start out with the Caro-Kann. It goes e4, c6, d4, d5, knight c3, d takes e4, knight takes e4, and we're going to take a look at the Karpov variation with knight d7. Now the super main line in the Karpov variation is going to begin with knight to g5. And there's a lot of theory on this, and this is actually a very theory-heavy opening starting with the move knight g5. But if you want to just play kind of like a little kind of Weasley kind of move or try to sneak in checkmate, you can play this cute little queen e2 move. And I'm not sure exactly what the name of this move is, but it sets up an immediate checkmate threat. You're threatening immediately knight to d6 mate. And you'd be pretty surprised how many people will just fall right into this mate. They'll play knight on g to f6 almost out of habit, and then you can end the game with knight d6 mate. So now, of course, the correct move is not knight on g to f6, because then the game ends quickly and we go, yay, we win, and it's pretty awesome. The correct move is knight on d to f6. Now, here's the thing about this. This position isn't really properly explored. For the most part, the reason is because players have enjoyed getting a slight edge in the main line with knight g5, so the move queen e2 seems pretty awkward. Why would we put our queen in the way of our minor pieces? It seems like when they play knight on g to f6, it seems like our pieces are pretty misplaced. But let's say you played for this trap, because, you know, traps are incentive to play just about anything, and your opponent plays knight on d to f6, and you're stuck. You have to play this position. Now, I've spent a lot of time actually trying to figure out exactly how to get the most out of this type of position. So my first thought was, why not just play something like c3, and then on knight takes e4, queen e4, knight f6, we just shuffle the queen back to c2. This seems to make a lot of sense, because maybe we just kind of intend to develop our bishops in sort of a supernatural way. Like maybe we're just going to play something like bishop d3 followed by bishop f4. But it seems like black gets a pretty easy game after, say, bishop g4, bishop f3, and then, say, queen d5. Because it's hard for us to play knight f3, so we're going to have to play something like f3, bishop h5, knight e2, and then after, say, bishop g6, knight f4, bishop d3, knight d3. There doesn't really seem to be a whole lot here for white. White's exchanged off his good bishop, and there's just not much to play for. Like, white's doing okay. I mean, the position's equal, so you can certainly play chess like this, and you can play chess from here. There's just not a ton to write home about. So that variation is kind of, that has a lot to be desired. Another variation that kind of has a lot to be desired that people have certainly tried is you could try the move knight to f3, which is kind of a similar idea, and then knight takes, queen takes, and then knight f6. Now, of course, the issue here is you'd like to be able to play a move like, say, queen e2, and then sort of just start fianchettoing this bishop with like g3 and bishop g2, or possibly even c3. But this doesn't seem to work out with the tempos. If you play queen e2 right away, they're going to play bishop to g4, and then when you play c3 to defend, they're going to throw in queen d5 before you get a chance to play pawn to g3. And this is actually really bad, because they're going to take on f3 and they're going to double your pawns, and it's going to be a mess. So this doesn't seem to work either. So if you want to do something like this, it seems like you have kind of two choices. Like, you can play knight f3, and then after queen e4, knight f6, you can shuffle that queen back to d3. This actually seems more acceptable. We're going for something kind of similar to the last line, where we end up shuffling our queen back to e2. So, like, say something like bishop to g4. Now we can play knight e5, because our queen isn't pinned. And then after, say, bishop h5, now we can play c3. Everything is fine. e6, and then we can play this kind of cute move, queen h3. And we actually have an advantage here after queen h3, believe it or not. This is actually advantage white. So this queen d3 idea actually has some potential within the position to play for an advantage for white. White is actually already threatening g4, followed by knight g6, followed by g5. So like against a nothing move, for example, we would play g4, and after knight g6, we'd be taking advantage of this pin on the h file. We'd play knight g6. They would have to play fg6, and then we'd win a clean pawn with g5. And queen takes e6, and white would have a major advantage here. And just actually, this move, queen h3, just in general, is kind of difficult to meet. It looks like a silly move, but you know, white should actually be slightly better here, just given the threats that he has in the position, the good outpost on e5, and just the generally good position that he has. But I wasn't, totally satisfied with either of these options, with either, pawn to c3 or the option of playing queen to d3. So I decided, I really want to come up with something a little bit better. Like, I want to play for an advantage with white. I want to get an exciting kind of complex position, the types of positions that everybody likes to play. And I want to play for even more traps if I can. So I came up with this idea. The move knight g5. And this looks a little weird. And the way I was thinking about it was, okay, even if I have to retreat this knight back, and I end up with these two knights kind of in each other's way, it sort of makes a little bit more sense that white's knights are in their way than it does that black's knights are in their way. Because white intends to eventually plant a knight on e5, and it's really cool that we can bring another knight up to support that knight. If we have knights on f3 and e5, that's going to be ideal. So if they were to play something like h6 and kick us back right away, unfortunately, we can't play knight takes f7. I checked on the engine. Trust me, we can't play it. It's like -3 or -4. The point is, after king takes f7, knight f3, we're not getting in knight e5 fast enough because they're going to play bishop f5 and they're going to cover all of their light squares. So knight e5 check, king e8, and then we would have to play something passive like c3 just to hold the pawn, and then queen d5 is just decisive advantage black. So against the immediate h6, we would have to bring our knight back to f3. But our formation of knights is a little bit better than black's formation of knights. So for example, bishop g4, we can play c3 and just hold that pawn, and then we can eventually kick that bishop. And of course, they don't want to take, because if they play bishop takes f3, we're just replacing that with a knight, and now we have a bishop pair and we have an advantage, and we're just going to finish our development by developing our bishop to the long diagonal. So bishop d6, g3, we develop to the long diagonal, and we've got a great position. We've got two bishops, we've got a knight that we can plant on e5, and our queen is ideally placed on e2 to hold that e5 square, and basically keep black having less space. The e5 square is a really critical point in the Caro-Kann. So here, this is just very clearly slight advantage white. So I liked this a lot. So when looking at, h3, I was thinking, okay, well, logically people are going to play bishop f5, but if they do this, then we can plant the knight on e5, and then we can send back up. And we can basically do the same plan. We play knight e5, we play knight f3, and then we're going to have this pawn g3, bishop g2, and this should undoubtedly be slight edge white as well. White's pieces are perfectly placed, and it's actually going to be very difficult for black to finish his development. It's very awkward. He's going to have to put his knight on an awkward square, he's going to have to transfer it to another awkward square to contest our pieces, and basically white should just enjoy a slight advantage while black awkwardly tries to finish his development. So that brings me to the last part of this, the fun part, the cool part. So you played for the trap didn't work, you played knight g5. If they play h6, it's boring and you got to move your knight back. But what if they play into this? They just take the free pawn, or the seemingly free-looking pawn. This is a lot of fun. Like, I think white has a huge advantage here after knight on 1 to f3. It's a speculative gambit for sure, but I'm not sure exactly what black does to not get enormous amounts of trouble here. So you're gaining this tempo, the queen is going to have to move, so let's say queen d6, and then we would continue with bishop d2. So basically the idea is we're just going to castle, and we're going to put some immediate pressure on this queen with our rook and with all of our massive development. And at this point, if our knight gets kicked, we intend to sacrifice this knight. We're not going to play around. This knight is just immediately going to sacrifice itself, and that should be okay. So for instance, let's say h6, we're going to play knight takes f7, king takes f7, knight e5, king e8, then we're going to castle queenside. And we actually have more than enough for the sacrifice in this position. we have a lot of threats that are on the table. It doesn't actually look like there's anything immediate, but keep in mind, we have bishop a5 on the table right now, kind of threatening rook d8. So we can't just play anything we want here as black. If, for example, we played some random move h5, which I know it looks like a silly move, but it's actually a computer recommendation. The point of h5 is the computer wants to be able to block bishop a5 with knight d5, where queen h5 no longer works. So here we would play c4, we'd get our piece back, and this would be major advantage white. So h5 doesn't prevent the threat of bishop a5. So I know what you're thinking, why don't we just sidestep with the queen? So instead of h5, we could just move our queen out of the way of this threat. We could play queen c7. If we do this, this queen's going to come to d3 and threaten queen g6, and this will be completely winning. There isn't a good move here. We're threatening to come in with the queen to g6 and the knight to f7, and it does look like the knight is hanging on e5, but it's really not. If queen takes e5, we have queen g6, king d7, or king d8, bishop f4 check picks up the queen. And that'll be a completely winning position for white as well. So really the only alternative is to try to cover those light squares with something like bishop f5, and that also covers the d8 square. But this is a problem. We just play bishop c3. Just nice, calm move, gaining a tempo against the queen. The queen is going to move to some place like c5. We're going to play g4, just gaining space, gaining tempo. Bishop g4, f3, gaining more space and tempo. Bishop h7, and now queen c4. I know it seems weird exchanging queens when we're down a piece, but none of black's pieces can really move in this position. The rook on h8 has very serious problems holding itself. So, for example, queen c4, bishop c4, and knight f7 followed by knight h8 is coming, and there's not really anything black can do to stop it. So, for example, black could play knight d5 to try to block things up, but white could simply sacrifice an exchange. He could play rook d5, c d5, bishop b5 check, and now the knight comes to f7 anyway, and then takes that rook, and that's going to be major advantage white. So this is a really interesting idea. The main part of this whole thing is after queen e2, we're getting that mate in 1. If knight on g to f6, we have knight d6 mate. And if they don't do this, we can probably get a very interesting position after knight on d to f6. We just simply play knight to g5. And we're going to have actually a very, very interesting position at our disposal, and we're going to get a very fascinating game if you can just play these ideas correctly. So I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you learned something new about chess, and I hope you found some ideas that you can play in your own games. Thank you very much for watching.